and sold my land to fund sister's Harvard education. I built a tech empire and got sweet revenge. You have more than enough money to help us keep our house, my sister snapped, eyes blazing across the coffee shop table. You're just being spiteful. That's when I, Olivia Chen, pulled out the check for exactly $50,000, the precise value of the land my grandmother left me that my parents had secretly sold to fund my sister's Harvard education. This isn't for you, I said, sliding it across the table. This is for girls whose families actually believe in them. The look on their faces? Priceless. But let me tell you how this Vietnamese-American girl from suburban Pennsylvania went from being the invisible daughter to the family's last hope. 4 years earlier, my parents had laughed in my face when I showed them my MIT acceptance letter. Engineering is a waste of money on a daughter like you, my father said, not even bothering to look at the scholarship offer. That same month, they'd sold my inheritance to pay for my sister's art history degree at Harvard. What they never expected was that this betrayal would create the woman they'd later be begging for help, or that I'd discover the shocking family secret hidden in my mother's drawer that explained their lifelong favoritism. This isn't just another family drama. This is how I went from waitressing at IHOP to leading a tech team at a Fortune 500 company, all without a penny of support from the people who should have believed in me most. And by the end of this story, you'll see exactly how educational favoritism can either crush you or become the fuel for the most spectacular revenge success story of your life. Undefined? I'm Olivia Chen, the firstborn daughter in a Vietnamese-American family in suburban Pennsylvania. Ever since I built my first computer at age 12, from parts I salvaged from neighbors' trash on collection day in our pristine colonial-style neighborhood, I dreamed of becoming a software engineer. While other kids had posters of the Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears on their walls, I had a framed photo of Katherine Johnson, the NASA mathematician. Nothing made me happier than solving complex problems with elegant code, that moment when everything clicked and my creations sprang to life on screen. But in my traditional family, my passion might as well have been invisible. Why waste time with computers? My mother would sigh during Sunday dinner at Grandma Kim's restaurant, where locals lined up for her famous PHO. You should focus on finding a nice Vietnamese boy from church. Look at the Nguyen's daughter, already engaged to a doctor. Meanwhile, my sister Sophia, 4 years younger, would be praised extensively for her mediocre watercolor paintings. Such talent, my father would exclaim, carefully placing them on the refrigerator while my coding competition medals gathered dust in my desk drawer. Every American milestone told our family's true story. My Sweet 16 fell on Super Bowl Sunday, and my parents celebrated with a store-bought sheet cake from Walmart after the Eagles game ended. My gift? A $20 makeup set from CVS and practical clothes for job interviews. 4 years later, Sophia's Sweet 16 featured a catered party at the country club with a professional photographer and personalized cupcakes. Her gift? A brand new MacBook Pro with all the accessories I had researched and shown my parents months earlier for my own schoolwork. She needs it for her art, my father explained when he saw my face fall. Your basic laptop is fine for your computer things. He couldn't even call it programming or coding. It was always just computer things, as if I was playing Oregon Trail rather than building software that local businesses had started paying me to create. Sophia was everything I wasn't. Petite, conventionally beautiful, socially graceful. She had our mother's delicate features and our father's charm, the kind that got extra breadsticks at Olive Garden without even asking. I took after my grandmother, tall, sturdy, with a direct gaze that made people uncomfortable and a mind that preferred logic to small talk. You're just like your grandmother, my mother would say with a slight grimace. So practical. What she never mentioned was that my grandmother had been the family's true success story, escaping Vietnam with nothing but her wits after the fall of Saigon, building a successful restaurant business in America, putting herself through night school while raising children. My grandmother was the one who slipped me coding books when my parents refused to buy them, who whispered, "Education is freedom" in Vietnamese when no one was listening. Despite everything, I loved Sophia. She didn't create the favoritism, even if she basked in it like a cat in sunlight. Once, after my parents refused to let me attend a coding camp at Carnegie Mellon, a waste of money, I found an envelope under my pillow containing 43s, all of Sophia's babysitting money. Not enough for the camp, but enough to show she saw the injustice too. Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? That's how I lived for 18 years, existing in the negative space around my sister's spotlight, watching her dreams receive irrigation while mine withered from drought. The contrast was so stark that even our family friends noticed, though they never said anything directly. Mrs. Patel from next door would quietly bring me books about famous women in STEM whenever she visited, her eyes communicating what her words couldn't. But as I was about to discover, being overlooked wasn't just bad parenting or cultural expectations. It was a deliberate strategy built on a family secret that would change everything I thought I knew about our picture-perfect suburban life. My senior year of high school became a desperate race against invisibility. While my parents hired 200 an hour SAT tutors and college counselors for Sophia, who was only in 8th grade, I practically lived in the computer lab at Spring Valley High. I stayed after school, helping the IT department debug the school network in exchange for extra computer time. My English teacher, Mrs. Matthews, a Bosnian immigrant who recognized the hunger in my eyes, let me eat lunch in her classroom while I worked on college applications. "Apply to the best schools," she urged, bringing me coffee as I polished my MIT essay for the 3rd time. "Never let anyone else define your ceiling." Her accent grew stronger when she was passionate, and she'd tap my application with her bright red fingernails for emphasis. I maintained a 4.0 GPA while working weekends at the King of Prussia Mall food court, saving every penny. I won the state coding competition with an app I designed to help visually impaired students navigate school resources, beating out teams from wealthy private schools with actual funding and support. The Philadelphia Inquirer even ran a small story about it, which my parents didn't bother to read, though it sat on our kitchen counter for a week before mysteriously disappearing into the recycling bin. Mrs. Matthews wrote my recommendation letter, tears in her eyes as she sealed the envelope. "You're the most brilliant student I've encountered in 20 years of teaching," she told me. "Whatever happens with your family, don't let it diminish your light." 3 months later, the thick envelope arrived from MIT. I opened it alone in my room while my parents were at Sophia's middle school art showcase. "Dear Olivia, we are pleased to offer you admission with a substantial merit scholarship." I read it 6 times, running my fingers over the embossed logo, hardly believing it was real. MIT, the pinnacle of engineering education, wanted me. Me. The girl whose own parents couldn't see her potential. The scholarship covered 70% of the tuition, a miracle, but still leaving a significant gap I couldn't fill with my food court wages. Despite everything, a foolish hope flickered that this achievement, the hardest school in the country to get into, would finally make my parents proud enough to help. That evening, I placed the acceptance letter on the dinner table, my hands trembling slightly. I'd worn my nicest outfit, pulled my hair back neatly, even put on the makeup from that CVS kit. "I got accepted to MIT, I announced, unable to keep the smile from my face. "They're offering a substantial scholarship." The silence that followed still echoes in my nightmares. My father didn't even pick up the letter. He exchanged a look with my mother before saying, "Girls don't need such expensive education, especially in engineering. The college fund is for Sophia." My mother nodded, passing the mashed potatoes to my sister. "Engineering isn't suitable for a Vietnamese girl. What would the family say? Office job, good husband, practical future." Her words landed like stones, each one weighing down my dreams a little more. Sophia studied her plate, a small smile playing on her lips. She reached for her water, the David Yurman bracelet they had given her for Christmas catching the light. $300 of silver on her wrist, while my future was deemed unworthy of investment. "But I earned this," I said, my voice breaking. "MIT is the best engineering school in the world. This is everything I've worked for." "Don't be selfish," my father snapped, slamming his palm on the table. "Your sister has real talent that deserves investment. This discussion is over." 2 weeks later, I accidentally overheard my father on the phone with his lawyer in his home office. I had come to ask about community college options since MIT was apparently off the table. His door was ajar, and his voice carried clearly. "Yes, the transfer from the land sale is complete. The Harvard Fund is established in Sophia's name." The land sale. My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. He could only mean one thing. The property in Vietnam my grandmother had specifically left to me in her will, my only inheritance from the one person who had believed in me. They had sold it without telling me, without my permission, to fund Sophia's education at a school she hadn't even been accepted to yet. When I confronted them in the living room that evening, my father didn't even pretend to be sorry. He sat in his leather armchair, reading glasses perched on his nose, barely looking up from his Wall Street Journal. "Family resources go where they're most needed," he said, dismissively turning a page. The message was crystal clear. I wasn't worth investing in. That night, I cried until there was nothing left in me. Then a strange calm settled over me like frost. I looked at myself in the mirror, eyes swollen, and made a vow. They may control my past, but they will never control my future. Something inside me had fundamentally changed. The desperate need for their approval had been replaced by a steely determination to succeed despite them, perhaps even to spite them. What I didn't realize was that the worst betrayal was still ahead. The true reason behind their favoritism was hidden behind a locked drawer, in a secret that would shatter our family's carefully constructed facade forever. 3 days after learning about the land, I did something I'd never done before. I searched my parents' bedroom while they were at their country club brunch with the Wilsons and Patels. I needed to find my grandmother's will to see if there was any legal recourse for what they'd done with my inheritance. Their room was a shrine to order and appearance, everything meticulously arranged to project the image of perfect success. The California king bed with its designer duvet, the his and hers walk-in closets where my mother's Nordstrom dresses hung in color order, the framed family portraits where we all smiled like we meant it. I checked my father's filing cabinet first. Mortgage documents, insurance policies, tax returns, all labeled in my mother's precise handwriting. Nothing about my grandmother's will or the land. I moved to his desk, carefully rifling through drawers filled with fountain pens and business cards. Still nothing. As I was about to leave, I noticed something odd. My mother's bedside drawer was locked. In a house where privacy was a foreign concept, at least for my belongings, a locked drawer stood out like a neon sign. The small key was hidden beneath the liner of her jewelry box, right where she'd always hidden the key to her diary when I was younger. What I found inside changed everything I thought I knew about our family. It was a faded letter from Thomas Jefferson University Hospital, dated 16 years ago, the year Sophia was born. The clinical language couldn't disguise the bombshell it contained, paternity test results confirming that my father was not Sophia's biological father. There were other letters, too, from someone named James Sullivan, apologizing, promising financial support. Photos of my mother with a tall, artistic-looking white man whose features Sophia clearly inherited. The same blue-green eyes, the same bow-shaped lips, the same artistic temperament that no one else in our family possessed. I sat on their bedroom floor, ears ringing like I'd been slapped. Sophia wasn't my full sister. She was the result of my mother's affair. The perfect daughter, the favored child, not even my father's biological daughter. Suddenly, her preferred status made a twisted kind of sense. I found my mother's journal beneath the letters. its leather cover worn soft from frequent handling. Inside, an entry from shortly after Sophia's birth read, "David says he forgives me, but the way he looks at her sometimes terrifies me. I've promised him anything, everything, if he will keep our family intact and raise her as his own." Meanwhile, little Olivia watches us with those knowing eyes, so like his, missing nothing. She is his true daughter in every way, which makes this even harder. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Their excessive favoritism of Sophia wasn't about loving her more. It was compensation, a daily penance my mother paid to keep my father from leaving, and a twisted way for him to reclaim control. I was punished not for any inadequacy, but for being legitimate, for being the living reminder of what should have been. I carefully replaced everything except the hospital document, which I tucked into my pocket before relocking the drawer. Then I waited in the living room until my mother returned home from brunch, the Nordstrom shopping bags in her hands suggesting another successful expedition at the mall. When she saw my face, she knew. The bags dropped to the floor as I held up the hospital letter. "Is this why?" I asked, my voice strangely calm. "Is this why she gets everything and I get nothing? Because you're trying to buy Dad's forgiveness for your affair?" Her face drained of color, porcelain skin turning ashen in seconds. "You were never supposed to know," she whispered. "How did you find this? Does it matter? Is it true?" She sank onto our white leather sofa, suddenly looking decades older. "Yes," she admitted after a long silence. "Your father knows. We agreed we needed to give Sophia more, to make sure she never feels unwanted, never suspects. It was the price of keeping our family together." "By making me feel unwanted instead?" I asked, my voice finally breaking. "By sacrificing my future?" She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "You're stronger, Olivia. You've always been stronger. You're his biological daughter. You would always have a secure place." The cruel absurdity of it hit me like a physical blow. I was being punished for being legitimate, for being resilient, for being my father's actual daughter. Every dismissal of my dreams, every comparison that found me lacking, every resource directed to Sophia instead of me, all because of a secret I had nothing to do with. "Does she know?" I asked. The horror in my mother's eyes answered before her words. "No, and you can never tell her. Promise me." I made no such promise. Instead, I walked upstairs to my room and began to pack. The family portrait on my nightstand seemed to mock me now, our smiling faces concealing a web of lies so intricate, I wondered if anything about us had ever been real. That night, as my parents slept and Sophia texted friends from her custom-designed bedroom, I made a decision that would change all our lives forever. If I stayed, I would always be the collateral damage in their elaborate deception. It was time to write my own story, one where my worth wasn't determined by someone else's guilt or shame. By morning, I was gone, with no idea that in 4 short years, they would be the ones seeking my help, and I would be the one with the power to grant or deny it. With $2,467 in savings, a duffel bag of clothes, and my ancient laptop, I left a simple note. Staying with friends for a while. They barely noticed I was gone. My mother texted 3 days later, "Will you be home for Sunday dinner?" Not, "Are you safe?" or, "Please come home." Just concern about keeping up appearances at the weekly family meal where we all pretended to be normal. I found a tiny studio apartment above Kim's Vietnamese grocery in downtown Philadelphia. A converted storage room with just enough space for a mattress on the floor and a folding table for my computer. The shower in the shared bathroom ran either scalding or freezing, never in between. But the rent was only $450 a month, and for the first time, I had a space where no one compared me to a favored sibling, where my worth wasn't constantly measured and found wanting. I applied for every job I could find, walking until my shoes wore thin. I was hired as a waitress at IHOP for morning shifts and as a data entry clerk at a local insurance company for evenings. Between shifts, I'd race to the Free Library of Philadelphia, using their computers to teach myself programming through free online courses from Harvard and MIT, the very institutions I couldn't actually attend. My routine was brutal: up at 4 a.m. to arrive at IHOP by 5, serving pancakes and coffee until 1 p.m., rushing to the library until 4 p.m., then entering insurance claims until midnight. On the bus between jobs, I'd review coding concepts, scribbling notes in a dollar store notebook while other passengers dozed. I lost 15 pounds that first month, surviving on leftover pancakes and dollar store ramen. The circles under my eyes grew so dark that a regular IHOP customer once slipped me a Sephora gift card, thinking I couldn't afford concealer. But the mental freedom was intoxicating. For the first time, I was charting my own course, answering to no one but myself. I created a methodical learning plan: HTML, CSS first, then JavaScript, Python, Java, database management. I tracked my progress in a worn composition book, each completed module a small victory in my private war against limitation. When the library computers weren't available, I'd use the display models at Best Buy, pretending to be shopping while actually completing coding exercises online. Every dollar I earned went either to rent or my education fund. No movies, no restaurants, no new clothes. My splurges were extra computer time at the library and occasionally a real vegetable to stave off scurvy. When coworkers invited me for after-work drinks, I'd decline, returning to my tiny apartment to complete another coding challenge on my second-hand laptop, which ran so slowly that complex programs took minutes to execute. During this time, I found a Women in Tech meetup at a co-working space in Center City that became my lifeline. At first, I felt like a fraud among these actual professionals with degrees and business cards. I sat in the back, nursing the one free coffee, soaking up knowledge like a desert absorbing rain. By the third meeting, I was asking questions. By the fifth, I was helping debug other people's projects. There I met Rebecca Goldstein, a senior developer at a financial software company. She spotted me working on a particularly complex algorithm during the pre-meeting social hour and looked over my shoulder. "That's an elegant solution," she said. "Where did you learn to code like that?" When I told her my story, minus the family secret, she offered to become my mentor. Rebecca had started her own career later in life after escaping an abusive marriage, teaching herself to code while raising 2 children. Every Sunday morning, she'd meet me at a Starbucks near Rittenhouse Square to review my progress, suggest resources, and share industry insights. "The traditional path isn't the only way," she told me, her laptop covered with stickers from tech conferences I could only dream of attending. "What matters is your portfolio and problem-solving ability. Create things that demonstrate what you can do." There were countless nights I wanted to quit. Nights when debugging felt like searching for a black cat in a coal mine. Nights when imposter syndrome whispered that I was fooling myself, that without a degree I'd never be taken seriously. Nights when the sheer mountain of knowledge I still needed to acquire seemed insurmountable. During those dark moments, I'd take out the jade pendant my grandmother had given me before she died and remember her words. "When America seems cruel, remember that you are descended from women who survived boat journeys in storms, who rebuilt lives from nothing. Their strength is in your blood." 8 months into my self-education journey, I completed my first significant app, a scheduling tool that optimized restaurant staff shifts based on skill level, availability, and table section profitability. I built it because I saw how chaotically the IHOP manager handled scheduling, creating endless conflicts and favoritism issues. When I showed it to him, he was skeptical but agreed to try it for 1 week. The results were immediate: smoother service flow, fair distribution of lucrative sections, fewer callouts. Soon, other restaurants in our chain requested customized versions. I charged a modest fee for each, adding the money to my education fund. This small success gave me the confidence to apply for a coding bootcamp scholarship specifically designed for women from non-traditional backgrounds. The application required a portfolio and personal essay. I submitted my scheduling app, a website I'd built pro bono for a local women's shelter, and an educational game teaching coding basics to kids. When the acceptance email arrived, offering a full scholarship to the 12-week intensive program at Philly Code Academy, I screamed so loudly my elderly Vietnamese neighbor banged on the wall and shouted something that definitely wasn't congratulations in our native tongue. The bootcamp transformed my life. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued my intelligence, who saw my potential rather than my limitations. While some classmates complained about the workload, I thrived on it. After months of cobbling together my education in stolen moments between exhausting jobs, having uninterrupted time to focus solely on learning felt like luxury. For our final project, my team created an app called Pathfinder that connected self-taught programmers with mentors and educational resources based on their specific goals and learning styles. During the presentation day, when industry professionals attended to scout talent, I spoke about the barriers to traditional education and how technology could democratize learning opportunities. Afterward, a woman approached me, Olivia Chen, engineering director at a major financial technology company. "Your solution shows real insight into non-traditional learners," she said. "We're looking for developers who think differently. Are you interested in interviewing?" 2 weeks later, I accepted a job offer with a starting salary of $95,000, more than 3 times what my father made as an accountant. When I signed that contract, sitting in a gleaming conference room overlooking the Philadelphia skyline, I felt a sense of vindication so intense it was almost dizzying. The daughter not worth investing in had just landed a job at one of the most prestigious tech companies on the East Coast. I moved into a real apartment in Rittenhouse Square, bought a professional wardrobe at the same mall where I'd once served food, and began building the life I'd always envisioned. I didn't call my parents to share the news. Their absence from my struggle meant they had no place in my success. Little did I know that our paths would cross again, in circumstances none of us could have imagined. 4 years passed in the blink of an eye. I rose through the ranks with almost frightening speed, moving from junior developer to team lead to department head. My approach, combining technical excellence with the people skills I'd honed during my waitressing days, proved extraordinarily effective. I led the development of a financial security product that increased our company's market share by 15%, earning me features in tech magazines and speaking invitations at conferences. I bought a downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city where I'd once served pancakes at dawn. I started a foundation called Code Her Future to help girls from disadvantaged backgrounds access tech education. My life had transformed beyond recognition, from the designer clothes in my closet to my executive parking space to the respect I saw in people's eyes when I entered a room. I rarely thought about my family. Occasionally, I'd see my mother's name pop up on my phone with a text on holidays or my birthday. I'd respond with brief pleasantries, maintaining the thinnest veneer of connection. Once, I bumped into my father at Nordstrom while shopping for a suit for an upcoming keynote speech. He looked startled, as if seeing a ghost, then quickly composed his features into polite disinterest. We exchanged awkward small talk about the weather before I excused myself, leaving him standing by the dress shirts, looking somehow smaller than I remembered. According to Instagram, Sophia was living her best life at Harvard: sorority formals, spring break in Cancun, art exhibitions with uniformly positive comments from our relatives. The golden child continued her reign, at least in the carefully curated online version of reality. Then came the call that changed everything again. It was a Sunday evening in May. I was reviewing code for a major product launch, my apartment filled with the golden light of sunset, reflecting off the Liberty Bell Pavilion visible from my window. My phone displayed "Mom" on the screen. Unusual timing, since our minimal communication typically occurred only on holidays. "Olivia?" My mother's voice sounded strained, almost unrecognizable. "We need to talk to you. It's important." She explained in halting sentences that they were in serious financial trouble. Sophia had dropped out of Harvard after 3 years, after burning through not just her college fund, but additional loans my parents had taken out to fund her increasingly extravagant lifestyle. Worse, they had remortgaged their house to cover her expenses and now faced foreclosure. She promised it was for networking opportunities, my mother said, her voice cracking. Art supplies, essential workshops. But now, she trailed off. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral as I gazed out at the city lights from my 18th floor window. "She's back home, saying Harvard was too stressful, that she needs time to find herself. Meanwhile, the bank is proceeding with foreclosure. We need $50,000 to keep the house," my mother explained, desperation evident. "Your father is too proud to ask, but we have nowhere else to turn." The irony was almost too perfect. The exact amount they needed was remarkably close to the value of the land they had sold, my inheritance that should have funded my education. Now they wanted me to replace it, to save them from the consequences of their choices. The daughter they hadn't believed in was now their only hope. I agreed to meet them at a coffee shop near my office the following day. I chose the location deliberately, my territory, not theirs. A public place where they couldn't make a scene. A neutral ground that wasn't loaded with memories of dismissed dreams. When I arrived precisely on time in my designer suit and Louboutin heels, a splurge after my last promotion, they were already there, huddled around a corner table. I barely recognized them. My once imposing father looked deflated, his expensive watches and tailored shirts replaced by department store basics. My mother's carefully maintained appearance had slipped, showing signs of stress I'd never seen before. Sophia sat beside them, still somehow wearing designer clothes despite the family's financial crisis, scrolling through her phone with elaborately manicured nails. She barely looked up when I approached, as if this meeting were an inconvenience rather than a last-ditch effort to save their home. I sat down across from them, placing my laptop on the table. No one spoke for a moment. The contrast between us was stark. Me in my tailored business attire after coming from a meeting, them in clothes that looked increasingly worn. The power dynamic had shifted completely. "We wouldn't ask if we had any other option," my father finally said, unable to meet my eyes. "We can pay you back eventually." I opened my MacBook Pro and pulled up 2 files. The first was my MIT acceptance letter from years ago. I turned the screen toward them. "Do you remember this?" I asked quietly. "The opportunity you said wasn't worth investing in?" My father looked away. My mother started to speak, but I held up my hand. For once, I would not be interrupted. "I've done well for myself, despite having no support. I taught myself to code between serving pancakes at IHOP and entering data until midnight. I slept 4 hours a night for months. I lived in a room the size of your walk-in closet, not because I had to, but because you decided my dreams weren't worth supporting." Sophia finally looked up from her phone, rolling her eyes. "Are you going to help us or just complain about ancient history? Not everything is about you, Olivia." "Actually," I replied, turning to her, "this particular situation is very much about me. About choices made years ago that are now having consequences." I then opened my banking app and wrote out a check for exactly $50,000, the estimated value of my grandmother's land they had sold. I took my time, filling it out carefully, aware of their eyes on me, the tension building with each stroke of my pen. As I slid the check across the table, I said, "This isn't for you. This money will establish a scholarship fund in my grandmother's name for girls whose families refuse to support their education. I'm naming it after her, not our family name." The shock on their faces was profound. My father's mouth opened and closed without words. My mother began to cry silently. Sophia's expression turned to anger. "You have more than enough," she snapped. "You're just being spiteful. This isn't just about them, it affects me too. Where am I supposed to live? Maybe in the real world, where most people live, I replied calmly. Where we work for what we have and face consequences for our choices. What about the fact that Sophia isn't even Dad's daughter? The words slipped out before I could reconsider them, hanging in the air like smoke. Does that explain why you tried so hard to compensate? Why I was punished for being legitimate? My mother gasped, her hand flying to her throat. My father went completely still. Sophia's phone clattered to the table, her face draining of color. What are you talking about? Sophia whispered, looking between our parents with dawning horror. Ask them, I said quietly, gathering my things. Ask them about the letters in Mom's locked drawer. Ask them why they felt they had to prove their love for you by denying me everything. I walked out of that coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in years, as if I'd finally put down a burden I'd been carrying since childhood. Behind me, I left not just my family, but the need for their approval that had shaped so much of my early life. Ahead lay a future entirely of my own making. As I pushed through the revolving door into the spring sunshine, I heard the commotion erupting behind me, Sophia's voice rising in accusation, my mother's sobs, the scrape of my father's chair as he stood. Their carefully constructed facade was crumbling in public, in a Starbucks in Center City, Philadelphia, while baristas called out orders for caramel macchiatos and business people typed on laptops. I didn't look back. That wasn't my story anymore. News travels fast in tight-knit immigrant communities. 3 months after our coffee shop confrontation, my mother's cousin Nancy called me. I'd always liked Nancy. She'd been the one who smuggled me SAT prep books when my parents refused to buy them, claiming I wouldn't need them anyway. Your parents lost the house, she said without preamble when I answered. They've moved to an apartment in Northeast Philly. Your father is taking on extra accounting clients. Your mother is working as a receptionist at a medical office. I absorbed this information silently, trying to identify what I felt. Not satisfaction. Not quite sadness either. Perhaps something closer to vindication. Not because they were suffering, but because reality had finally caught up with the fantasy they'd constructed. And Sophia? I asked, surprising myself with the question. Nancy snorted. Working at anthropology at the King of Prussia Mall. No more Instagram photo shoots at the Hamptons. She moved out for a while after whatever happened at that coffee shop, then came back with some conditions. She's paying rent now, if you can believe it. The perfect family image had crumbled completely, replaced by a more modest reality. The confrontation at the cafe had apparently triggered a complete reevaluation of family dynamics. The golden child had fallen from her pedestal, and the parents who had invested everything in her at my expense were now facing the consequences of that unbalanced approach. Meanwhile, I channeled my energy into my foundation. The $50,000 I had committed that day at the coffee shop became the seed money for what would grow into a significant operation. We partnered with tech companies like Microsoft and Google for additional funding, established connections with coding bootcamps for discounted tuition, and created a mentorship network connecting experienced women in tech with girls who reminded me of my younger self. We provided coding bootcamp scholarships to 20 young women that first year, each with stories painfully similar to mine, brilliant minds held back by family expectations or financial limitations. We named it the Jade Foundation, after my grandmother's pendant, with the tagline, "Recognizing Potential Others Miss." There was Zara, a Pakistani-American whose immigrant parents thought technology was not for girls and refused to pay for anything but nursing school. There was Jessie, whose brother received college tuition while she was expected to work immediately after high school to help support the family. There was Madison, whose traditional Southern parents saved for her brother's medical school but told her that marriage was her best career option. Each scholarship recipient received not just financial support, but mentorship, internship opportunities, and a community of peers and professionals who believed in their potential. We created what I had lacked most, a support system that recognized and nurtured talent regardless of gender or background. The foundation became my way of transforming personal pain into something constructive. Each time a scholarship recipient sent me an email about landing her first tech job or mastering a difficult programming concept, I felt a piece of my own past heal. The educational favoritism that had nearly crushed my dreams was now fueling opportunities for others. 2 years after our coffee shop meeting, my assistant buzzed my office. "There's a David Chen here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says he's your father." I sat perfectly still for a moment, staring at the phone. Then, "Send him up." My father had aged considerably in 2 years. His once commanding presence had diminished, his shoulders slightly stooped, his hair more gray than black. His clothes, while clean and pressed, showed signs of wear. The designer watch was gone from his wrist, replaced by something practical and inexpensive. "Olivia," he said, standing awkwardly in my office doorway, "you've done well for yourself." His eyes took in the corner office, the awards on the wall, the view of Philadelphia spread out below. "What can I do for you?" I asked, not unkindly, but not warmly either. "I wanted to talk," he said simply. "If you have time." I gestured to the chair across from my desk, and he sat, placing his worn briefcase carefully on the floor beside him. "I was wrong," he said after a moment of silence. "About everything. About you." He explained how losing their status, their home, had forced him to re-examine the values he'd built his life around. How watching Sophia struggle with basic responsibility had made him recognize the strength and determination he had overlooked in me. "I thought I was protecting her," he admitted, "because of her situation." He couldn't bring himself to directly reference the affair that had produced her. "But I ended up spoiling her instead, and hurting you in the process." "Your mother sends her apologies too," he added. "She's too ashamed to come herself. The way we prioritized Sophia's education while dismissing yours, it's our greatest regret." I studied him for a moment. The man who had once seemed like the final authority on my worth now looked small, diminished not just by age, but by the understanding of his own mistakes. "And Sophia?" I asked. He sighed, a deep sound from somewhere in his chest. "She had a hard time. Finding out about her biological father. She blamed your mother at first, then me for the favoritism, then you for revealing it. Now she's starting to blame herself for not seeing it sooner." He shook his head. "She's in therapy, working at the mall, taking a few community college classes, learning to live without being the center of the universe." I felt no urge to gloat. Instead, I felt a strange sense of closure, and perhaps a whisper of compassion, not just for my parents, but for Sophia too. "Cultural expectations nearly destroyed both your daughters," I told him. "Sophia because she was given everything without earning it, and me because I was given nothing despite earning it." We didn't reconcile that day, not fully. Some wounds run too deep for simple healing, but we established a cautious, distant respect. I invited him to my foundation's annual showcase, where our scholarship recipients demonstrated their projects. He came and watched with quiet amazement as young women like me presented innovations they had created despite obstacles. Afterward, he approached one of our scholars, a Vietnamese American girl whose parents had refused to support her computer science dreams. I overheard him tell her, "Your work is impressive. You should be very proud. Your parents should be proud too." In that moment, I glimpsed a man attempting to atone for his mistakes through supporting another girl's dreams. My mother began volunteering at the foundation a few months later, helping with administrative tasks. We rarely spoke about the past, focusing instead on the work in front of us. But sometimes I would catch her watching me as I led a meeting or mentored a student, her eyes filled with a mixture of pride and regret. As for Sophia, our paths rarely crossed. She eventually moved to Los Angeles, posting carefully curated glimpses of a glamorous life that belied her actual circumstances. We exchanged occasional text messages, superficial, cautious. I didn't hate her anymore. I understood that she, too, had been shaped by our parents' choices, privileged but ultimately unprepared for a world that demanded more than beauty and charm. The favoritism that tore my family apart also, paradoxically, created a stronger, more independent woman than I might otherwise have become. Being the unfavored child freed me from constraints that might have limited me. While Sophia was boxed into a narrow definition of success, prestigious degree, appropriate marriage, traditional life path, I had to create my own definition, one that ultimately proved more resilient and fulfilling. In losing the family I was born into, I found something perhaps more valuable, the freedom to become fully myself, without the distorting lens of others' expectations or guilt. Today, I'm 30 years old and lead a team of engineers at one of America's most innovative fintech companies. My office has a view of the Liberty Bell, an appropriate symbol for someone who had to fight for her own freedom. When I look out that window, I sometimes think about the alternate timelines my life could have followed. The MIT graduate I might have been if my parents had supported me. The bitter exile I could have become if I'd let resentment consume me. Or worst of all, the person who might have given up entirely, accepting the limitations others placed on me. Instead, I forged my own path with nothing but determination, public library Wi-Fi, and the jade pendant my grandmother pressed into my hand on her deathbed. That pendant now sits in a glass case in our foundation office, reminding every girl who walks through our doors that sometimes your most important inheritance isn't money or property. It's the resilience in your blood. Last week, something extraordinary happened. I received an email from Zara, our first scholarship recipient. She had just been promoted to senior developer at Amazon and attached a photo of herself accepting the award. When my father told me technology wasn't for Muslim girls, she wrote, I believed him until I heard your story at that library workshop. Now he asks me to help set up his smartphone. You didn't just change my career path, you changed how my entire family sees women's potential. That email is worth more than any Tech Leader of the Year award on my shelf. Because when we transform our personal pain into purpose, we create ripples that extend far beyond what we can imagine. We rewrite not just our own stories, but the stories of others who come after us. Educational favoritism isn't just a personal family drama. It's a societal issue that crosses all cultural and economic boundaries. Sometimes it's brothers over sisters. Sometimes it's athletes over academics. Sometimes it's the child who physically resembles a parent over one who doesn't. The patterns are different, but the damage is the same. Untapped potential, fractured families, and the crushing message to the unfavored child that they somehow deserve less investment in their future. I've received thousands of DMs since I started speaking about my experience. A Black woman whose parents told her Ivy League schools aren't for people like us, who now holds a PhD from Princeton. A young man whose father invested everything in his brother's sports career while calling his interest in robotics a waste of time, who recently sold his tech startup for millions. A non-binary person whose religious parents refused to support any education that didn't align with their gender expectations, who is now a pioneering researcher in artificial intelligence. What links all these stories isn't just the pain of rejection, but the extraordinary resilience that turned that rejection into rocket fuel. As the saying goes, some people are born into their purpose, others have to fight their way into it. We fought, and our success tastes sweeter because of it. I want to hear your story. Comment below with 3 words that describe how you felt when someone underestimated your potential or denied you educational opportunities. Were you determined despite dismissal? Resilient through rejection? Successful from spite? Your 3 words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear as they face their own battle with educational favoritism. Tag a person who believed in your dreams when your family didn't. That teacher who stayed late helping you apply for scholarships. The librarian who saved books for you. The neighbor who taught you skills your parents wouldn't pay for you to learn. They deserve recognition for seeing what others missed. Share which part of this story resonated with you most deeply. Was it discovering my sister wasn't my father's biological daughter? The coffee shop confrontation? The journey from IHOP waitress to tech executive? Your answer might be featured in my next video, where I'll explore how family dynamics shape educational outcomes and how to overcome toxic patterns. For those currently facing educational favoritism, document everything. Save your achievements, recommendations, and acceptance letters. They'll remind you of your worth when others try to diminish it. Find allies outside your family, teachers, counselors, community programs. Create multiple paths to your goal. Remember that traditional college isn't the only route to success. Coding boot camps, trade schools, apprenticeships, and self-education can all lead to fulfilling careers. In my next video, I'll reveal the exact 5 strategies I used to educate myself without traditional credentials, techniques that helped me bypass gatekeepers and prove my worth through pure skill. I'll share the specific free resources that transformed me from a waitress to a tech leader in less than 2 years, the networking approaches that opened doors without family connections, and the mindset shifts that helped me overcome imposter syndrome. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. Remember, no one can take away your potential or limit your dreams unless you give them that power. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to internalize other people's limitations on your worth. And sometimes the family that matters most is the one you build yourself, relationship by relationship, among those who see your light rather than trying to dim it. My grandmother's final words to me were in Vietnamese, Con Duong Gian Cu Sedan Jen Nung Ngoi Sao. The difficult path leads to the stars. She was right, though she couldn't have imagined how literally her words would apply to my life, or how her small jade pendant would help educate hundreds of girls like me. Looking back, I realized that being the unfavored child gave me the greatest gift of all, the freedom to define success on my own terms, unburdened by others' expectations. While Sophia was drowning under the weight of being the perfect daughter, I was building wings that would eventually let me soar. So what's your story? What dreams are you fighting for? Who tried to limit you, and how did you prove them wrong? The comment section is waiting for your voice, because your journey might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to keep pushing through their own struggle with family favoritism. Your story matters, your dreams matter, and most importantly, your determination matters more than anyone else's doubt. Never forget that.